and that leads me to believe that the entire tech sector is on thin ice here for a bigger move to the downside. So if you're someone who's saying, wow, do I buy Bitcoin now? Honestly, the answer is no.
In today's video, Chief Market Strategist of InTheMoneyStocks.com Gareth Soloway tells us all about his latest analysis of the charts as well as his predictions and price targets for Bitcoin. Soloway shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed.
Listen, the bottom line here is we are looking at a potential breakdown in the tech sector, maybe in the entire market. Let's jump right into the charts right over here. Now, what you're looking at is the daily QQQ chart. This is the NASDAQ 100. And the first thing that I saw on Friday at the close was that we had closed below this wedge pattern. Now, again, wedge patterns, why do they form? Basically, price is consolidating, right? Essentially, you start with a wider range, like something like this, and you get tighter and tighter and tighter. That creates your wedge pattern. The kicker is this, is whichever way you break, it's usually a big move in that direction. And what did we have right here? Look at this. Pivot high, pivot high, pivot high, pivot high, pivot low, 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 and look at that candle right there. So very clearly we have a potential breakdown on the NASDAQ 100 that gets my attention. Now this week, remember, we have the FOMC decision. That's on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Thursday, the Bank of England. Friday, the Bank of Japan. So this is a power-packed second half of the week, but right now, per Friday's close, the warning bells should be going off for market technicians that something could be brewing here. All right, so that's one of the things I wanted to show you on this chart. There's something else here. So we know that the semiconductors are a key component of the NASDAQ 100. We know that NVIDIA has led the market. You could arguably say that has been the leader. Apple used to be the leader. I look at what's the hot play, what's the hot thing to be in, that's NVIDIA. But look at what we have on the SMH. Now remember, the SMH is the Semiconductor Index, or ETF. And what we have very clearly is we have a channel development, right? We have these pivot points all along here that, again, were giving us these perfect channels. Right to this gap fill, right to here, and look at what happened right there. You have a breakdown on the SMH. So, again, the NASDAQ broke down on Friday, the SMH broke down on Friday, and that leads me to believe that the entire tech sector is on thin ice here for a bigger move to the downside. All right, one other thing I want to point out here that's really, really important. So if we get rid of these lines here, and I just want to keep this simple, if you remember last week, one of the key things that I brought up to your attention was that we had essentially a pattern formation on the SMH that was eerily similar to that of Bitcoin. Okay, now Bitcoin at the top, mind you, the top of 65 to 69,000 in 2021. And so just to rehash this, and again, what you're going to see is you're starting to see how things I talked about last week, earlier last week, by Friday we started to see things play out. And my goal here is to deliver real actionable alpha and in the very least make you aware of things so you don't get caught off sides. So here we go, right? So we have this obvious move up here, very Bitcoin-ish, right? Down move, that's your middle of the year for Bitcoin, except this is the SMH chart. So again, the SMH is the semiconductors. It's not Bitcoin. But the key here is understanding higher high than here. So lower high, higher high, just like Bitcoin. And then what did I say last week? I said, guys, be careful because you could start to see this playing out very similar to Bitcoin. Okay, so again, just to rehash, remember that M top pattern? And then if we flip over here and we go to the Bitcoin chart, here we have it, right? Here's your exact same pattern, and look at that higher high, right? Same kind of deal. And then look at where we've gone all the way down. So again, the reason why patterns repeat and why I use them to my advantage is because not because they're perfect. Nothing is perfect. I know I've said that a million times, but it is important to repeat. But patterns give you probabilities. Patterns are humans basically buying and selling. That's how charts are formed, right? Buyer goes up, causes up price, seller down, up, down, right? Buyers and sellers. And so ultimately, the fact is humans don't change. If you go back 5,000 years, 10,000 years, people were greedy at certain points and they were fearful at certain points. And so people were buying, they were FOMOing in, they had FUD on the other side. All of those things are here today. And that is why patterns tend to repeat. And that's why for us, we know that when patterns tend to repeat, we can utilize them to put probabilities in our favor. Now let's flip over to NVIDIA. Did NVIDIA also give us a signal? Well, and the answer is yes. We had the same sort of breakdown on NVIDIA. This beautiful channel here, you hit the high end, high end, high end. Here's your low end right through here. All of that right here. And then look at what Friday did. Closed right below it right there. Now again, interestingly enough, last I checked, NVIDIA was down at about $9 pre-market already. And again, one thing to just remember, if you look at valuation, now you could make a case that, hey, listen, if NVIDIA keeps their margins where they are and they continue to grow at the rate that they're growing, then maybe this does justify this price. But the one thing I have said multiple times in this game plan, and I hope you've taken heed of it, is that ultimately every other semiconductor is looking at NVIDIA and saying, wow, I want to get some of the action that they're getting. I want margins where they're involved. I want to be in their group of AI chips. And so competition is coming like crazy, right? So everyone is coming after them. And what that does is when the market, the stock market prices 6 to 12 months out, people, smart money, has to start saying, wait a minute, can it justify, if every other semiconductor is going to start printing these chips or making these chips, how do you justify a valuation up here when margins are going to collapse? And by the way, think about Tesla. Tesla was in the same situation, 2021. It was really the golden child. Amazing margins, everything. What has Tesla done? They've cut price over and over again because of competition. And so to maintain their ability to sell X amount of vehicles, they have to cut price. That is eventually what's going to happen to NVIDIA. It's going to be very, very hard to justify the valuation. So in my opinion, you'll see further downside on NVIDIA. Now again, will it have bounces? Yes. Probably gets to down. I ultimately, by the way, where I would be interested in buying it, if we ever get down here, this would be a really interesting area, right around 300, right in here. Gap fill. There's a huge gap here. That's a very interesting level, but we have to watch to see how it comes into that level. But I'm going to flip over to Bitcoin, and we're going to talk some Bitcoin action, because Bitcoin's actually getting a nice pop today that said, guys, we're starting to make bullish consolidation, which means you're probably headed up. You can see it right here, right? So again, what is bullish consolidation? It's a sharp move up, and then it's sideways price action, maybe a little bit of a downward slope, and it usually leads to an up move. What did we get here? Up, sideways, up. Very standard in technical analysis. That is a very standard formation. The other thing too to go over is to understand what the price action was telling us. Let the chart speak to you. And again, one of my favorite things to tell people that I educate on trading is to say, this to most people looks like gibberish. It looks like nonsensical ups and downs. But just like a text, if you open a book and it's in a foreign language that you don't speak, you're going to be like, what the heck is this? I have no clue what this is saying. But if you learn how to translate, if you learn how to read that language, it starts to make sense. Charts are very much the same way. What I mean by that is this, is that essentially, if we look at this, right, and again, let's just take a look at this chart. If we looked at the price action, here was the Ripple news, green candle and red, right? What is that telling you? If price can't hold, just simply, again, basic 5-year-old knowledge, if price can't hold, it's not a good thing, right? Price popped on the Ripple judge decision and it reversed. So what does that mean? Negative. What does price do? It's negative, right? Goes down, and then you actually had this beautiful flush. Then you had right here, all right, this was the grayscale positive news there. All right, grayscale judge's decision. Price pops, 2 days later, it reverses. That's not good. Then price starts to decline. We get a drop. Here's a down candle. But then look, the very next day, we reversed it. Basically, the opposite of this occurred right here. In addition, it was right around this lower level right here at a pivot support, right? So again, this now changes, and I remember the day this happened. If you go back to this very game plan, and this is just the nuggets of kind of gold that I'm throwing out to you guys. In this very day, I said, guys, short-term bias is now up. Now, again, this doesn't change the fact that I still think Bitcoin can eventually hit, 15K again, and then maybe 12 to 13K again, and maybe worst case scenario, this would be like if the stock market crashes 40%, then maybe it hits 9 to 10K. That's still on the table potentially, but short term, where price goes over the next couple days to week, that switched to bullish. And you can go back in these game plans. They're obviously public knowledge, and you can see where I talked about that. Since then, price has gone back up. Now, interestingly enough, let's talk about how high can price rally, right? So, I mean, let's talk about it. So if you're someone who's saying, wow, do I buy Bitcoin now? Honestly, the answer is no. And I'm going to tell you why. All right, so the first thing on this chart is to basically take a trend line and just draw it down like this, okay? So this is the first thing you got to recognize. So if we take this, right, you take that high, and let me just move this out of the way so we can actually see it here, okay? There we go. So this high, okay, there we go, excuse me, to this high, and look at what price is hitting. Now, could price break through this level? The answer is, of course it could. It might even be a 50-50, but never do you buy into resistance. You buy on a pullback. You buy after this, right? Where you're hitting support right there, and you get the reversal candle, all right? And you're not buying, like, think about this. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. Like, all right, so here's a wall. Tell me to run forward. I'm going to smack into the wall, right? I mean, literally, well, it's a TV, and I'm not going to break this TV, obviously, or this digital TV. But the point is that when you're buying here, you're essentially you're starting a race at the wall. You don't want to do that. You want to start your race down here where you have room to run. So now, listen, let's talk about a scenario here. What if we break through this level? Where's your upside target? That would be your return to the scene of the crime. That would be the target. So could this, excuse me, go to 30? Yes. But again, right now, you are into resistance.